Picture this: a world without science, without written history, where every rustling leaf, every flash of lightning, and every unexplained shadow held a story. For our prehistoric ancestors, the universe was a vast, unknowable mystery, and they filled that void with beliefs so strange, so wildly imaginative, that they blur the line between myth and reality. These were not mere superstitions, they were the very fabric of understanding, the way early humans made sense of everything from the changing seasons to the origins of life itself. Today, we're peeling back the layers of time to uncover 25 of the most bizarre beliefs held by prehistoric cultures, ideas so fascinating, they'll make you question how differently our ancestors saw the world. Imagine standing beneath a sky alive with stars, not as distant balls of gas, but as the spirits of long-dead hunters watching over the land, or walking through a forest where every tree hummed with the presence of unseen guardians. To prehistoric people, the world wasn't just alive, it was teeming with forces beyond our modern comprehension. They saw gods in the wind, ancestors in the rocks, and omens in the flight of birds. Some of these beliefs were born from fear, others from awe, but all of them reveal something profound about the human mind, our relentless drive to explain the unexplained, no matter how extraordinary the answer. This journey isn't just about listing strange ideas, it's about stepping into the minds of those who came before us, seeing the world through their eyes. From rituals meant to summon rain to sacrifices believed to appease vengeful spirits, every belief we'll explore tells a story of survival, wonder, and the boundless creativity of human imagination. So settle in, because by the time we're done, you'll never look at the past or the present the same way again. The mysteries of prehistoric belief are about to unfold, and trust me, they're even stranger than you think. One of the most enchanting prehistoric beliefs was that the moon wasn't just a glowing rock in the sky, but a massive celestial bowl filled with milk. Imagine looking up at the night sky and seeing not a barren satellite, but a shimmering vessel holding the very essence of life. For some ancient cultures, this wasn't poetic fantasy, it was truth. They saw the moon's phases as the bowl tipping, spilling its luminous milk across the heavens, nourishing the earth below. This wasn't just a passing myth. Archaeologists have uncovered cave paintings and carvings showing the moon as a rounded container, often held by a deity or floating among stars. One striking example comes from a site in modern-day France, where ancient artists painted the moon as a curved, shallow dish surrounded by droplets, perhaps representing the milk cascading during a lunar eclipse. Other cultures believed rituals performed under a full moon could harness this celestial nourishment, with shamans mimicking the act of drinking from the sky to bring fertility to crops or strength to warriors. But why milk? For early herding societies, milk symbolized abundance, purity, and life itself. If the moon controlled tides and seasons, it made sense that it also sustained the world with a divine liquid. Some even thought the Milky Way was the overflow from this cosmic bowl, a river of spilled light arching across the night. These beliefs weren't just whimsy, they shaped daily life. Lunar calendars marked the best times to plant or hunt, and ceremonies aligned with the moon's phases to ensure its milk would never run dry. Today, we know the moon's glow is just reflected sunlight, but isn't it mesmerizing to think that once humanity looked up and saw something far more magical? Thunder didn't rumble, it roared. To prehistoric ears, the deafening crashes splitting the sky weren't just weather. They were the bellows of enormous, unseen beasts battling in the clouds. Across continents and cultures, people shared this spine-chilling belief. Storms were the work of colossal creatures, their fury shaking the heavens. Some tribes in North America spoke of the thunderbird, a winged titan so massive its flapping wings stirred hurricanes and its piercing cries became lightning. In Scandinavia, fragments of oral poetry describe Thor's chariot racing through storm clouds, pulled by goats whose hooves struck sparks that became thunderbolts. But perhaps the most vivid evidence comes from ancient cave art. In a Spanish cavern dated over 20,000 years old, researchers found paintings of hulking, bull-like figures with storm clouds woven into their outlines, sky beasts whose very presence explained nature's violence. These weren't just stories, they were survival manuals. If thunder was a monster's growl, then appeasing it became life or death. Tribes in the Amazon danced with masks mimicking these sky creatures, believing imitation might calm their wrath. In Mongolia, shamans left offerings of blue cloth symbolizing the sky at mountain peaks where they thought the beasts nested. Even the tools of daily life reflected this dread. Neolithic axes, often carved with swirling storm patterns, weren't just weapons, they were charms to borrow the sky beast's power. Why imagine monsters instead of weather patterns? Because in a world without science, attributing chaos to a living force made it feel controllable. A storm might ignore you, but a beast could be bargained with. Modern meteorology explains thunder as expanding air, but stand in an open field during a storm and tell me you don't feel the ghost of that ancient fear, that primal sense something alive is watching from above. To our prehistoric ancestors, shadows weren't just patches of darkness, they were fragments of the dead, lingering spirits trapped between worlds. Picture walking through a sunlit valley, your shadow stretching long behind you, and believing with every fiber of your being that it wasn't just an absence of light but a lost soul tethered to you. This chilling idea spanned cultures, from the dense forests of Europe to the vast deserts of Africa. People truly thought stepping on a shadow could curse the living or torment the dead. Evidence of this belief is etched into ancient art and rituals. In a cave in modern-day Turkey, archaeologists found handprints deliberately smudged to blur their shadows, a possible attempt to confuse or free trapped spirits. Meanwhile, tribes in the Australian outback performed dances at dawn and dusk when shadows stretched longest, moving carefully to avoid crossing each other's dark silhouettes. They believed doing so could steal a person's vitality or summon a spirit's wrath. Even children's games reflected this fear. Some Native American tribes had strict rules against shadow tag, seeing it not as play but as a dangerous tampering with the supernatural. But why souls in shadows? Early humans noticed how shadows mimicked the living, moving when they moved, vanishing when they slept, like ghosts bound to their owners. Without understanding light physics, it was easy to see shadows as something alive, and if they were souls, damaging them had consequences. Artifacts reveal amulets carved with spiral patterns, possibly meant to trap shadows safely against the body. Other cultures buried their dead at noon when shadows were shortest to give the soul an unobstructed journey to the afterlife. The fear wasn't just poetic, it shaped daily behavior. Hunters in ancient Siberia would freeze mid-step if another's shadow crossed their path, abandoning the chase to avoid ill fortune. In parts of West Africa, leaders sat under canopies not just for shade, but to prevent their soul shadows from being captured by enemies. These practices may seem strange now, but they reveal a profound truth. For our ancestors, the boundary between the seen and unseen was porous, and every shadow held a story waiting to unfold. When the earth trembled and fire spewed from mountain peaks, prehistoric people didn't just see disaster. They witnessed a doorway opening to the realm of the dead. Across cultures, volcanoes were revered as sacred thresholds where spirits crossed between worlds. Their eruptions not random acts of nature but deliberate messages from the underworld. Imagine standing at the base of a smoldering mountain, watching molten rock carve rivers of light into the night. How could that not feel like the veil between life and death tearing apart? Archaeology confirms this belief ran deep. Near the slopes of Italy's Mount Etna, researchers discovered pits filled with carefully arranged animal bones and polished stones, offerings left to appease the gatekeepers of the underworld. In Hawaii, legends tell of Pele, the goddess of fire, whose eruptions were her furious attempts to reunite with her lost lover in the spirit realm. But perhaps the most haunting evidence comes from Mesoamerica, where the Popol Vuh, an ancient Mayan text, describes volcanoes as the smoking mouths of Xibalba, the terrifying underworld where souls underwent trials. These weren't just myths, they dictated how people lived. Villages near volcanoes often had shamans who specialized in reading eruptions, interpreting the patterns of lava flows as omens. In Japan, Ainu tribes performed ceremonial dances facing active volcanoes, believing the rhythmic movements could calm the spirits within. Even the act of sacrifice took on new meaning here. Excavations in Iceland revealed charred human remains encased in volcanic rock, suggesting some saw volcanic eruptions as moments to send chosen messengers, willing or not, into the spirit world. Why gateways? For early humans, few forces were as awe-inspiring as a volcano's raw power. If earthquakes could split the ground and fire could rain from the sky, why wouldn't such a place be where worlds collided? Modern geology explains magma and tectonic shifts, but the ancients understood something else, that terror and reverence often walk hand in hand, and sometimes the most terrifying places are also the most sacred. In many prehistoric societies, twins weren't just siblings. They were beings touched by the supernatural, capable of bending the natural world to their will. From the dense rainforests of the Amazon to the sweeping savannas of Africa, cultures across the globe believed twins possessed powers far beyond ordinary humans, their very existence seen as both a blessing and a terrifying omen. Some tribes thought twins could summon rain with a single cry or command the wind to change direction, while others feared their arrival signaled imminent disaster, a drought, a flood, or worse. Archaeological finds reveal just how deeply this belief ran. In an ancient burial site in what's now Nigeria, researchers uncovered the remains of twins laid to rest with intricate beadwork and carved ivory figurines, gifts meant to honor, or perhaps appease, their spirits. Meanwhile, in the Andes, pre-Incan graves show twins buried with their hands bound, a precaution to prevent their restless souls from unleashing chaos after death. But perhaps the most telling evidence comes from cave paintings in southern France, where stick-figure twins are depicted hovering above hunters, their outstretched arms seeming to control the movements of animals below. Why such reverence or fear? For cultures dependent on the whims of nature, twins represented duality itself, life and death, abundance and famine, order and chaos. Some believed twins shared a single soul split between two bodies, making them conduits between the physical and spiritual worlds. Others saw them as living omens, their birth a sign that the gods were either pleased or angered. Rituals varied wildly. Some tribes celebrated twins with feasts, while others exiled them to the wilderness, fearing their presence would upset the natural balance. This duality extended to daily life. Farmers in ancient Mesopotamia planted twin seeds during ceremonies, hoping to harness their symbolic power for fertile harvests. In parts of Polynesia, twin births triggered elaborate dances meant to calm the spirits within them. Even language reflected this belief. The word for twin in some Native American dialects translates roughly to two-storm, a nod to their perceived control over the elements. Modern science explains twins as a genetic phenomenon, but to our ancestors they were something far more mysterious, living proof that the boundary between the ordinary and the miraculous was thinner than anyone dared to imagine. To prehistoric eyes, the sun wasn't merely a burning star. It was a celestial chariot, a blazing vehicle racing across the sky, pulled by mighty beasts or even winged deities. This belief wasn't confined to one corner of the world. It spanned continents, appearing in cultures separated by oceans and millennia. Picture the awe of early humans watching the sun's daily journey. How else could something so vast and luminous move with such precision, if not on a divine wheeled carriage? The evidence is etched into ancient rock faces worldwide. In Scandinavia, Bronze Age petroglyphs depict the sun as a circle with radiating spokes, often drawn alongside horses or birds, clear symbols of its imagined transport. Meanwhile, in the American Southwest, Puebloan carvings show the sun carried by a giant turtle or antelope, its path marked by zigzagging lines representing the chariot's fiery trail. One of the most striking examples comes from India, where the Rigveda, a sacred text over 3,000 years old, describes the sun god Surya riding a chariot harnessed to 7 mares, their hooves scattering sparks that became daylight. But why a chariot? For early agrarian societies, the sun's movement wasn't just a spectacle, it was the heartbeat of survival. If the sun's journey could be imagined as a vehicle, then rituals could be designed to keep it rolling. Germanic tribes lit massive wheel-shaped bonfires during solstices, rolling them down hills to mimic the sun's motion. In China, Shang dynasty oracle bones reveal prayers to the sun charioteer, begging him not to falter on his daily route. Even the names of ancient gods reflect this belief. The Greek Helios, the Hindu Surya, and the Slavic Dazbog all shared the title of charioteer of the heavens. The animals chosen as the sun's steeds were never random. Horses symbolized speed and endurance, while birds like eagles or swans represented the sky's boundless freedom. Some cultures, like the Norse, believed wolves chased the solar chariot, explaining eclipses as moments the beasts nearly caught their prey. Others, like the Aztecs, envisioned a team of jaguars, their fiery pelts mirroring the sun's glow. These weren't just poetic choices, they tied the sun's power to the most revered creatures in each culture's world. This belief wasn't passive, it shaped entire civilizations. The wheel, one of humanity's most transformative inventions, may have drawn inspiration from solar symbolism. Early wheels found in European bogs often bear sun-like carvings, suggesting they were ritual objects before becoming tools. And the layout of ancient cities, many, like Egypt's Heliopolis, were designed as cosmic diagrams, with temples aligned to the sun's chariot path at dawn. Today, we know the sun's motion is an illusion caused by Earth's rotation, but there's something hauntingly beautiful about the idea of a flaming chariot crossing the sky. It speaks to a time when the cosmos wasn't just observed but felt, when every sunrise was a miracle and every sunset a promise that the wheels would turn again tomorrow. To prehistoric ears, an echo wasn't just sound bouncing off rock. It was a spirit trapped in the stone, whispering back. Imagine standing in a canyon, calling out, and hearing not your own voice returning, but the reply of an invisible being hiding within the earth. This belief wasn't limited to one culture. From the mountains of Greece to the caves of Australia, ancient people were convinced echoes carried messages from another realm. The proof is carved into the walls of ancient caves. In France's Lascaux caves, alongside paintings of bison and horses, archaeologists found strange red handprints positioned near natural alcoves, spots where echoes resonate strongest. These weren't random markings. By placing their hands where voices answered, our ancestors seemed to be making contact, leaving behind symbols of connection between the living and the unseen. Even more telling are the cave paintings in Indonesia's Sulawesi region, where stick figure shamans are depicted with open mouths facing walls, as if in conversation with the stone itself. Why spirits in echoes? Without an understanding of acoustics, the phenomenon felt supernatural. A voice that sounded like yours but wasn't yours. What else could it be but a mimic, a ghost, or a god? Some Native American tribes believed echoes were the voices of ancestors, offering guidance or warnings. In the Scottish Highlands, legends warned that certain caves housed echo spirits who would steal the voices of those who mocked them. Meanwhile, the Maori of New Zealand saw echoes as evidence of the Patupea, pale forest spirits who repeated human words to lure travelers into their world. Rituals grew around these beliefs. In ancient Greece, travelers would shout questions at specific cliffs, interpreting the delay or distortion of the echo as divine answers. Basque shepherds in the Pyrenees had echo stones, curved rocks they'd strike with staffs, listening for spirit voices in the reverberations to predict the weather. And in parts of Africa, shamans would chant into narrow cave passages, believing the echoes that returned carried prophecies from the spirit world. The fear wasn't just imaginative, it was practical. Many cultures avoided speaking loudly near echoing cliffs at night, fearing unseen listeners might steal their words or their souls. Some Pacific Island tribes even had strict rules against laughing near echoing caves, worried it would anger the spirits inside. Others, like the Taino people of the Caribbean, saw echoes as protective forces, carving spiral symbols into cavern walls to trap helpful spirits who could repeat enemy war cries and confuse invaders. Modern science explains echoes as sound waves reflecting off surfaces, but that doesn't dim the magic of the ancient view. There's something hauntingly beautiful about imagining the past as a world where every rock had a voice, where the very air could whisper back. Stand in a canyon today, shout, and listen just for a moment to the reply. It's not hard to understand why our ancestors heard something far more mysterious in that sound than physics. To prehistoric farmers gazing at a parched sky, rain wasn't just weather. It was the weeping of generations past, a celestial grief spilling from the spirit world. Across continents, cultures clung to a hauntingly beautiful idea. When ancestors mourned, their tears became the raindrops that nourished the living. Droughts weren't dry spells, they were moments when the dead had no sorrow left to give. Artifacts tell this story in startling detail. In Peru's Nazca Desert, where rain could mean life or death for crops, archaeologists uncovered pottery depicting faces with streaming eyes, tears morphing into stylized rainfall. Similar imagery appears in West African Yoruba art, where bronze masks of ancestral figures were ritually watered during dry seasons to coax their tears from the heavens. But perhaps the most poignant evidence comes from Australia's Arnhem Land, where ancient rock paintings show spirits with hollow eyes, their tears cascading into rivers below. Oral traditions there describe songline ceremonial chants used to comfort the ancestors during droughts, believing their sorrow needed release to bring rain. The rituals surrounding this belief were as elaborate as they were heartfelt. In Mesopotamia, priests would pour libations into clay pipes leading to graves, symbolically sharing the living's water with the dead. The Hopi of North America performed the butterfly dance, wearing masks adorned with falling rain, symbols to remind ancestors of their connection to the living world. Meanwhile, in parts of ancient China, families would gather during droughts to air grievances, speaking aloud their regrets to departed loved ones, a ritual believed to provoke the emotional release that would bring rain. Why tears? For early agricultural societies, rain was the difference between feast and famine. Linking it to ancestral emotion made its absence feel negotiable. If droughts meant the dead were numb with sorrow, then ceremonies could reawaken their feelings. Some cultures took this further, interpreting heavy storms as ancestral tantrums, proof the dead were furious rather than sad. Villages in the Andes still tell legends of weeping mountains, where echoes during rainstorms are said to be the sobs of giants buried in the rock. This belief wasn't just poetic symbolism, it shaped entire worldviews. The Zulu people's word for rain, imvula, translates loosely to the sky's weeping, while in Celtic myths, dew was called the tears of the Morrigan, a goddess mourning lost warriors. Even the tools of survival reflected this connection. Rain drums found from Mali to Mesoamerica were often carved with weeping faces, their beats mimicking the rhythm of falling tears to summon storms. Modern meteorology measures rain in millimeters and pressure systems, but the ancient view holds a fragile truth. Grief, like water, cycles through generations. Stand in a downpour today and for a moment imagine each drop as a story, a sorrow, a memory, a voice from the past reminding us that even the sky remembers what we've lost. When a comet streaked across prehistoric skies, it wasn't just a celestial spectacle, it was a blazing herald of catastrophe. To ancient eyes, these fiery visitors weren't random cosmic debris but deliberate warnings, divine messengers screaming through the darkness to announce impending doom. The terror they inspired wasn't confined to one culture. From the steppes of Central Asia to the jungles of Mesoamerica, comets were universally feared as portents of war, famine, or worse. The evidence of this dread is etched into the archaeological record. In Germany, a mass grave dating back 7,000 years contains dozens of skeletons buried in unison, their bones arranged in a pattern mirroring the tail of Halley's Comet visible in the sky that very year. In China, oracle bones from the Shang dynasty bear inscriptions like "The broom star brings the death of kings," referencing comets' long, trailing tails. But perhaps the most chilling proof comes from the Maya, whose Dresden Codex depicts a comet as a serpent swallowing the sun, its passage foretelling the collapse of dynasties. Why such panic? Without telescopes or astronomy, comets were unpredictable intruders, bright, sudden, and utterly beyond control. Unlike the orderly movements of planets or stars, comets blazed into view without warning, their erratic path seeming to defy the natural world. The ancient Romans called them stellae crinitae, hairy stars, believing their tangled tails symbolized chaos unraveling the cosmos. In Scandinavia, Norse sagas described comets as the breath of Fenrir, the monstrous wolf whose howls would trigger Ragnarok. Rituals emerged to ward off their influence. Babylonian priests tracked comets meticulously, interpreting their paths as celestial battle maps. If a comet pointed toward a rival kingdom, it was seen as a sign to attack or prepare for invasion. In Egypt, pharaohs commissioned anti-comet amulets, blue faience charms shaped like eyes to watch back at the heavens. The Hopi of North America performed purification ceremonies during comet sightings, burning sacred herbs to cleanse the sky of its ominous message. The fear wasn't just symbolic, it reshaped civilizations. When a comet appeared in England in 1066, it was woven into the Bayeux Tapestry as an omen of William the Conqueror's victory at Hastings. In Constantinople, the sudden appearance of a comet in 1453 was taken as proof the city would fall to the Ottomans, a prophecy fulfilled weeks later. Even language reflected this terror. The Greek word kometes means long-haired, but its root implies something torn or frayed, like the fabric of fate itself unraveling. Today, we know comets as icy remnants from the solar system's birth, their tails merely sunlight reflecting off vaporized gas. But stand under a comet-streaked sky tonight, and you might still feel the ghost of that ancient awe, the whisper that says some lights in the darkness aren't just beautiful. They're watching. For prehistoric hunters crouched in the underbrush, the call of a bird wasn't just a sound, it could be a trap. Across continents, cultures shared a bone-deep fear. Certain animals didn't just mimic human voices, they stole them, swallowing words whole to use against the living. Picture a world where answering an owl's hoot or laughing at a parrot's chatter wasn't playful, it was an invitation for disaster. A chance for the animal to snatch your voice and leave you mute, or worse, turn your own words into a weapon. The proof lingers in forbidden practices and unearthed artifacts. In the Amazon, tribes like the Yanomami carried small bone whistles to check if bird calls were genuine, blowing them to see if the sound echoed, a sign it was safe to respond. Meanwhile, Australian Aboriginal rock art depicts lyrebirds with human mouths, their elaborate tail feathers woven with symbols representing stolen speech. But perhaps the most chilling evidence comes from Neolithic Europe, where archaeologists found clay masks with sealed lips buried near wolf dens, possibly offerings to prevent these cunning predators from absorbing human cries during hunts. Why this terror? For oral cultures, the voice wasn't just sound, it was identity, power, and soul. An animal that could replicate speech wasn't mimicking, it was hunting. The Cherokee told of the raven mocker, a bird that learned dying whispers to steal years from a person's life. In West Africa, folklore warned that hyenas memorized children's names at night to call them away from villages. Even domesticated animals weren't trusted. Ancient Egyptian texts describe taboos against repeating words near cats, believed to hoard human phrases and replay them to gods as evidence of their owners' sins. Rituals evolved to outsmart these vocal thieves. Siberian shamans wore necklaces of rodent teeth, creatures thought incapable of mimicry, as protective talismans. The Ainu of Japan practiced silent hunts, communicating only through hand signals near corvid nests, fearing crows would memorize their strategies. In Mesoamerica, scribes drew red lines through the mouths of animal deities in codices, symbolically sewing them shut to prevent speech theft. The consequences of breaking these taboos were dire. Inuit legends tell of entire villages falling silent after someone mocked a loon's cry, their voices lost to the ice forever. But this fear had a flip side. Some animals were revered as vocal guardians. The ancient Greeks believed swallows carried stolen words back to Apollo, who would return them if proper offerings were made. In Mali, Dogon priests kept sacred parrots not just as messengers but as voice banks, believing the birds could preserve ancestral wisdom by repeating it centuries later. Even today, traces linger. Think of how we say, "A little bird told me," unconsciously echoing the idea that animals mediate our words. Modern biology explains mimicry as adaptive behavior, but our ancestors understood something deeper. The voice is magic, and magic is always hunted. Next time you hear a crow caw or a parrot greet you, pause just for a second and feel the weight of that ancient warning, the whisper that says some echoes aren't echoes at all. To countless ancient cultures, the Earth didn't just float in space, it rested on the shell of a cosmic turtle, swimming endlessly through the void. This wasn't just a whimsical tale, it was a profound explanation for everything from earthquakes to the horizon's curve. Imagine standing on a shoreline, watching the waves roll in, and knowing that each ripple was caused by the slow, steady stroke of a divine turtle's flipper beneath the world. Artifacts reveal how deeply this belief took root. The Lenape people of North America carved turtle shells with 13 segments, symbolizing the 13 moons balancing on its back. In Hindu temples, stone turtles bear the weight of entire pillars, their etched shells mirroring the continents they supposedly upheld. But perhaps the most striking evidence comes from Neolithic China, where jade earth discs have been found, each resting on a turtle figurine, some so precisely crafted that tilting them makes the disc wobble like a tectonic plate. Why a turtle? Its symbolism was universal: longevity, stability, and the ability to bridge realms. Turtles moved between land and water, making them natural candidates to carry the earth between cosmic layers. For the Iroquois, the great turtle's shell was the first land to form when Sky Woman fell from the heavens, its body expanding to hold her and all future life. In Mesopotamia, cylinder seals show turtles propping up the world tree, their limbs positioned at the cardinal directions. Even the Maya linked turtles to creation, depicting the rebirth of the maize god from a crack in a celestial turtle's carapace. This myth wasn't just poetry, it shaped how people interacted with the world. Tribes near the Great Lakes avoided eating turtles, fearing it might destabilize the earth. In India, temple builders buried live turtles under foundations as living cornerstones, believing their energy would steady the structure. And when earthquakes struck, the Inuit whispered that the world turtle was stretching its legs after centuries of stillness. The turtle's role expanded beyond mere support. Some African traditions described stars as bioluminescent algae growing on its shell, while Polynesian navigators used real turtles as guides, trusting they'd follow the same paths as their cosmic counterpart. Even language reflected this connection. The Mandarin word for the universe, Yuzhu, combines jade, representing heaven, and turtle, symbolizing earth. Modern science tells us the Earth spins through space, but the turtle endures. Look at any old map, and you'll see echoes of the myth. Medieval European cartographers drew dragons or giants at the edges of the known world, but somewhere, always, a turtle lurked in the margins, quietly holding it all together. There's a strange comfort in that image, a creature so patient, so steadfast, that entire civilizations could rise and fall on its back without it ever stopping its eternal swim. For our prehistoric ancestors, closing their eyes at night didn't mean resting, it meant embarking. Dreams weren't figments of imagination, they were real voyages, journeys of the soul leaving the body to wander distant realms, converse with spirits, or even battle unseen forces. And they had the maps to prove it. Scattered across ancient sites, archaeologists have uncovered carved bones and stones etched with intricate lines and symbols, not doodles but guides. In the Czech Republic, a 30,000-year-old wolf bone bears a series of interconnected spirals and dots, matching descriptions from oral traditions of dream paths leading to the underworld. Similarly, Ojibwe tribes in North America created birch bark scrolls depicting layered worlds, with dotted lines showing the routes shamans took during trances. These weren't abstract art, they were functional charts used to navigate the treacherous landscapes of the unseen. Why such literal belief without modern neuroscience? The visceral experience of dreaming, falling, flying, speaking to the dead felt too vivid to be illusion. The Warlpiri people of Australia still describe dreams as ukurpa, a parallel reality where actions have consequences. A dream injury might manifest as a real wound, and a dream hunt could fill next day's cooking pits. Evidence of this spills into burial practices. Neolithic graves in Siberia contain skeletons curled in fetal positions, their hands clutching small stones carved with maze-like patterns, dream maps meant to guide the deceased back if they wandered too far in the spirit world. Rituals reinforced this bond between dreaming and travel. The San people of southern Africa danced themselves into trances, their rapid movements mimicking the sensation of crossing into the dream realm. In ancient Scandinavia, sleepers placed iron knives under their pillows not just for protection, but to anchor their souls to their bodies, preventing them from getting lost. Even children participated. Celtic tribes gave toddlers dream pebbles, smooth stones painted with simple arrows, to teach them to recognize the path home if they awoke disoriented. The stakes were high. Some cultures believed staying too long in a dream could sever the soul's tether to the body, resulting in illness or death. Hawaiian legends tell of kupuyu, dreamers who never returned, their bodies wasting away as their spirits settled in the land of the gods. Conversely, a successful journey could bring power. The Maori recount how heroes like Hatupotu gained strength from dream battles, their waking bodies bearing scratches earned in spectral fights. Today, we understand dreams as synaptic fireworks but stand at the edge of sleep tonight. Feel that fleeting moment of weightlessness as consciousness slips, and tell me you don't sense the ghost of that ancient truth, that every closed eye is a door and behind it the map unfurls. Whistling after dark wasn't just bad manners, it was an open invitation for disaster. Ancient cultures worldwide shared a bone-deep conviction. The shrill notes of a nighttime whistle didn't just cut through the silence, they sliced through the veil between worlds, calling forth everything from restless ghosts to ravenous demons. Picture standing in a moonlit forest, pursing your lips to mimic a bird call, and realizing too late that something far darker had answered back. The fear left its mark in artifacts and rituals. In the ruins of Pompeii, archaeologists found bronze whistles shaped like coiled snakes buried under doorways, not toys, but spirit traps meant to ensnare entities drawn by human sounds. Meanwhile, in the mountains of Peru, mummies from the Chachapoya culture were discovered with clay discs sewn over their mouths, a post-mortem precaution against their spirits whistling up evil forces. But perhaps the most chilling evidence comes from medieval Europe, where whistle wards, iron amulets etched with musical notes, were nailed above cradles to drown out infant noises that might attract demons. Why such dread? Nighttime was already the domain of the unseen. Wind carried whispers farther, shadows played tricks on the eyes, and the boundary between the living and the dead felt thin. Whistling, with its piercing, wordless pitch, was thought to mimic the cries of lost souls or the hunting calls of malevolent spirits. The Ainu of Japan believed the Terenche, a bird-like demon, would mirror human whistles to lure victims into thickets. In West Africa, legends warned that whistling after dark alerted the Ads, a vampiric firefly that would slip into homes through the sound itself. Even practical explanations emerged. Baltic fishermen avoided whistling on boats not just for superstition, but because the sound resembled storm winds, a self-fulfilling prophecy. The taboos weren't passive. Siberian shamans performed counter-whistle rituals using bone flutes to play dissonant notes that would tangle spirit calls. The Navajo crafted whistle arrows fletched with owl feathers, believing their shrieks in flight could scatter evil beings. And in ancient Greece, shepherds chewed sour herbs before night watch to physically prevent puckering, a literal gag order against supernatural danger. But the fear had an unexpected flip side. Some cultures harnessed this power deliberately. Celtic druids used silver whistles to summon ancestral guides during new moons, while in the Congo, hunters whistled specific patterns to borrow the night vision of hyenas. The line between danger and tool was razor thin. A whistle could invite doom or wield it. Modern acoustics explain how sound travels farther in cool night air, but that doesn't shake the primal unease. Stand in a quiet backyard tonight and whistle just once. Notice how the darkness seems to lean closer. Some instincts, it seems, outlast their explanations. To prehistoric eyes, that looming mountain wasn't just rock and snow. It was a slumbering giant, its jagged ridges the curve of a spine, its landslides the restless shifting of a body too ancient to fully wake. Across the globe, cultures whispered of peaks that were once titans, frozen mid-stride by angry gods or trapped in stone by their own colossal rage. These weren't myths to dismiss, they were survival guides. If a mountain was alive, then its tremors and avalanches weren't random, they were moods, and moods could be soothed. The proof lingers in the offerings left behind. High in the Andes, hikers still stumble upon stone altars stacked with coca leaves and seashells, tributes to the Apus, the spirit giants believed to form the Cordilleras. In the Himalayas, Sherpas whisper of peaks like Everest as Chomolungma, the mother of mountains, her snowy shoulders said to stiffen when disrespected, triggering deadly storms. But perhaps the most haunting evidence comes from the Alps, where Neolithic tools have been found wedged into crevices at precise intervals, as if acupuncture needles meant to calm a slumbering behemoth's aches. Why giants? For early humans, mountains were the ultimate paradox, immovable yet crumbling, eternal yet violent. Their sheer scale defied explanation, so our ancestors gave them faces. The Norse told of Ymir, the primordial giant whose flesh became earth, his bones the mountains. Japanese folklore described peaks like Fuji as the frozen forms of Yamabiko, spirit giants who would echo human shouts to lure intruders into avalanches. Even the Greeks had their Titanomachy, where defeated giants were pinned beneath mountains, their thrashing causing quakes. Rituals evolved to keep these giants asleep. Basque shepherds tied red yarn around mountain stones, mimicking veins to trick the giants into believing they still pulsed with life. In the Caucasus, villagers avoided whistling near cliffs, fearing the sharp sound might startle the titans beneath. The Inca, master engineers of steep terrain, designed their terraces to follow the body's contours, planting crops like golden maize along a mountain's ribs as both offering and camouflage. The stakes were lethal. Landslides weren't geology, they were giants rolling over in their sleep, earthquakes, a titan's frustrated roar. In the Carpathians, folk songs warned against mining, lest the iron teeth of tools wake the giants fully. Meanwhile, Mongolian shamans performed lullaby ceremonies at cave mouths, believed to be the nostrils of subterranean colossi, humming until the Earth's vibrations settled. Today, we map tectonic plates, not titans, but stand at the base of a sheer cliff face, feel the rumble of falling rocks, and tell me you don't instinctively glance up. half expecting to meet the gaze of something old, something vast, something stirring. When the sky above the Arctic erupted in swirling ribbons of green and violet, prehistoric peoples didn't see atmospheric physics, they witnessed the dead at play. Across the frozen north, from Siberia to Scandinavia to the Inuit homelands, the aurora borealis was never just light, it was a spectral game of ball, the laughter of ancestors, or worse, the flickering torches of spirits hunting the living. And if you listened closely, some swore you could hear the thump of their celestial feet on the packed snow of the upper world. The evidence is etched into shamanic drums and oral traditions. Sami drum skins from northern Scandinavia depict the auroras as zigzagging lines connecting stick-figure spirits, their hands outstretched as if tossing an invisible ball. Inuit carvings from Alaska show similar scenes, whalebone figurines of ancestors with hollow eyes, their arms raised toward swirling ivory inlays representing the lights. But perhaps the most vivid proof comes from the Evenki people of Siberia, whose shamans still perform rituals with drums painted with red and blue spirals, a mirror of the auroras, believing the rhythms mimic the sound of spirits running across the sky's icy dome. Why ball games? The aurora's movement, rippling, darting, exploding in sudden arcs, matched the chaos of a match played by giants. The Inupiat told of Aksanit, the sky dwellers who used a walrus skull as their ball, its hollow eye sockets whistling as it spun through the air. Scandinavian legends described the lights as the Valkyries' shields reflecting fire, their deadly battle games visible to mortal eyes only on certain nights. Even the colors held meaning. Green streaks were the breaths of playful children's spirits, while red warned of a game turned violent, the players drawing blood. This belief wasn't passive wonder, it dictated survival. In Greenland, families sealed their doors during intense auroras, fearing the lights might swoop down and snatch souls. The Yukagir of Siberia forbade whistling under the spectacle, worried it would mimic the spirits' calls and draw their attention. Meanwhile, Sami herders tied iron rings to their reindeers' harnesses, the metal's cold fire, meant to deflect any stray celestial balls that might strike the herd. Shamans acted as intermediaries, using drums studded with brass to reflect the aurora's glow. They'd enter trances to join the game, bargaining with the spirits for good hunting or mild winters. Some Evenk rituals involved tossing dried fungi into the air, symbolic balls, while chanting for the lights to play gently and avoid avalanches. The risk was real. In Inuit lore, staring too long at the auroras could freeze your eyes open, your soul lured skyward by the dancer's beauty. Today, we know the lights are solar particles colliding with Earth's magnetic field, but stand under that shimmering curtain tonight, watch it pulse and twist like living fabric, and tell me you don't feel the echo of something older. A game without rules, played by players we'll never see, on a field that stretches beyond the edge of the world. To prehistoric ears, a sneeze wasn't just a reflex, it was the explosive escape of something sinister. Imagine the terror of early humans hearing that sudden, involuntary burst of air and believing it wasn't mucus being expelled, but a demon fleeing the body. This visceral fear wasn't isolated to one culture. From the steppes of Central Asia to the forests of Europe, people were convinced sneezes opened a fleeting doorway for malevolent forces to slip free. Archaeological digs reveal just how seriously this threat was taken. In Anatolia, excavations uncovered tiny clay masks no larger than a thumbprint, personal amulets worn around the neck to catch the spirits ejected by sneezes before they could re-enter the body or infect others. Meanwhile, in Norse burial sites, archaeologists found skeletons with thin metal plates placed over the nasal cavity, possibly to seal the dead against posthumous sneezes that might release restless spirits. But the most striking evidence comes from the Andes, where mummies of the Chachapoya culture were discovered with nostrils stitched shut using spider silk, a permanent solution to prevent spiritual leakage. The rituals surrounding sneezes were elaborate and urgent. The ancient Babylonians would immediately cover their mouths with a square of red cloth, red being the color believed to trap evil, while chanting a spell to lock the escaped demon in place. Roman senators carried small silver boxes filled with sulfur, snapping them open to inhale the fumes after a sneeze, believing the stench would repel any spirits lingering in the air. Even children weren't exempt. Celtic tribes gave toddlers sneeze stones, smooth pebbles etched with spiral patterns to place over their noses, teaching them young how to coil the escaping energy back inside. But why such dread without germ theory? The sheer violence of a sneeze, the convulsive force, the spray of moisture, felt undeniably supernatural. The Japanese called sneezes kami no kashami, or the god's cough, interpreting them as divine attempts to purge corruption from the body. The Zulu people of Africa viewed them as ancestral warnings, with a number of consecutive sneezes indicating whether the message was urgent or benign. And in parts of ancient Greece, a single sneeze during a ritual could halt proceedings entirely, requiring purification rites before continuing. The blessing custom we know today, saying health or God bless you, has roots in this primal terror. Germanic tribes would shout Gesundheit not as courtesy but as a shield, believing the word's hard consonants could shatter fleeing spirits. Medieval European peasants crossed themselves 3 times after a sneeze to rebuild spiritual defenses, while in India, elders would gently tug the sneezer's ear to close the gate against re-entry. Even now, traces linger. Think of how instinctively we cover our mouths when sneezing, less about hygiene originally, and more about slamming the door on something unseen. Modern medicine explains sneezes as nasal reflexes, but stand in a quiet room when someone sneezes. Watch how the air itself seems to flinch, and tell me you don't feel the whisper of that ancient fear, the sense that for one split second, something invisible and unwelcome got loose. To prehistoric eyes, a winding river wasn't just water in motion. It was the glistening body of an ancient serpent deity, coiled through the landscape with its own will and wrath. Across cultures, rivers were worshipped as living snakes, their currents the muscle of a colossal being, their floods the thrashings of a spirit provoked. And if you dared to cross one without paying proper respect, well, you might find yourself swallowed whole by the very waters you'd taken for granted. The proof lies in what's been pulled from riverbeds. In the Thames, archaeologists have uncovered Bronze Age swords bent into deliberate spirals, offerings tossed to the river serpent to calm its mood. Along the Mississippi, divers found stacks of smooth stones arranged in sinuous patterns, echoing the scales of the underwater horned serpent described in Choctaw oral traditions. But perhaps the most striking evidence comes from the Ganges, where centuries of pilgrims have dropped carved jade snakes into the water, believing the river's serpentine soul would recognize its own kind and spare them from drowning. These weren't just abstract myths, they shaped daily life. Fishermen along the Mekong avoided using hooks, fearing they'd snag the flesh of the great Naga serpent beneath the surface. Instead, they wove baskets to politely collect fish, leaving offerings of coconut milk to appease the creature. In ancient Britain, tribes hammered silver coins into the shape of snakes before tossing them into rivers payment for safe passage, like dropping coins into a toll booth operated by a watery god. Even children learned early. In West Africa, mothers tied tiny copper bells to their babies' ankles before bathing them, the jingling meant to alert the river serpent that this was a human child, not prey. Why serpents? Rivers shared their traits, silent one moment, violent the next, shedding their banks like skin after floods. The Aztecs called the Rio Grande Coatlicue ribbon, named after their serpent-skirted earth goddess, while Hindu texts describe the Saraswati River as the shed skin of the cosmic snake Shesha. Some cultures took it further. The Tlingit of Alaska believed each bend in a river marked where the serpent had paused to sleep, its dreams shaping the land around it. The rituals to honor these beings were as intricate as they were desperate. During droughts, shamans in Cambodia would float lanterns shaped like eggs down the Tonle Sap, tricking the river serpent into thinking its offspring were adrift, luring it to rise and follow them to parched fields. In medieval Germany, millers nailed iron snake heads above water wheels, believing the metal fangs would intimidate the river spirit from smashing their gears. And in the Amazon, certain tribes still paint their canoes with zigzag patterns, a visual plea, "We are snake kind too. Let us pass." Today, hydrology maps rivers as water responding to gravity. But stand on a misty bank at dawn, watch the current twist and flash like a scaled back breaking the surface, and you'll understand why our ancestors fell to their knees. Some truths don't need science, some truths slither. Gazing up at the night sky, prehistoric people didn't see distant suns. They saw the warm glow of ancestral campfires flickering across the dark expanse of the afterlife. Every pinpoint of light was a soul's eternal flame, a beacon guiding the living and marking the boundaries between worlds. This belief wasn't confined to one culture. From the deserts of Australia to the tundras of Siberia, constellations weren't just patterns. They were celestial graveyards, the hearths of those who'd gone before. The evidence is written in stone and bone. In the Lascaux caves of France, alongside paintings of bulls and horses, archaeologists discovered clusters of dots arranged in unmistakable patterns, early star maps, but with a twist. These weren't just guides for navigation, they were burial blueprints. Skeletons excavated beneath the caves were often positioned to mirror the star clusters above, their arms outstretched like the rays of Orion or curled like the crescent of the Pleiades. Meanwhile, in North America's Chaco Canyon, the Anasazi built their dead into Kiva's circular ceremonial pits aligned so precisely with the Milky Way that on certain nights, the starlight would pour directly onto the bones as if refueling their spectral fires. Why campfires? For hunter-gatherers, fire was life, warmth against the cold, protection from beasts, the heart of every gathering. It made sense that the dead would need their own. The Walpiri of Australia called stars Tijupi, the glowing embers left by ancestral beings who'd wandered the earth in the dreamtime. The Sami of Scandinavia whispered that the northern lights were sparks flung skyward when their shamans stoked the spirit world's great hearth. Even the materials of burial spoke to this connection. In Mongolia, Bronze Age graves held charred wood placed atop the deceased's chest, a literal piece of their future star ready to ignite. Rituals kept these cosmic fires burning. The Dogon of Mali performed dances mimicking the twinkling of Sirius, their movements designed to stoke its brilliance. In ancient Scotland, clans buried their dead with bundles of birch bark, a fast-burning fuel so their star fire wouldn't sputter out. The most haunting practice came from the Pacific Northwest, where the Tlingit launched flaming arrows into the night during funerals, each streak of light meant to guide the soul to its celestial hearth. But the bond between stars and ancestors wasn't just symbolic, it shaped landscapes. The pyramids of Giza align with Orion's belt not as an astronomical quirk, but because the pharaohs believed they'd ascend to join those very stars. Stonehenge's heel stone marks the summer solstice sunrise, but its lesser-known star holes, small pits filled with burned bone, match the positions of key stars, turning the entire site into a terrestrial echo of the night sky. Even today's cemeteries unwittingly carry the echo. Why do we call them resting places? Because once every grave was a kindling pile waiting for its match in the heavens. Modern astronomy tells us stars are nuclear furnaces billions of miles away but stand under a clear night sky. Watch the way the stars pulse like distant bonfires, and you'll understand why our ancestors reached for blankets when the Milky Way grew bright. Some instincts run deeper than knowledge, some truths still flicker. In a world where every abnormality signaled supernatural danger, few sights terrified prehistoric communities more than a newborn with teeth. These infants weren't just unusual, they were unnatural, their precocious smiles seen as proof of something sinister lurking beneath innocent flesh. Across continents, cultures shared the bone-deep conviction. toothed babies were witches, demons, or harbingers of calamity, and the proof of their fear lingers in the artifacts they left behind. Beneath the floorboards of Neolithic homes in Germany, archaeologists have uncovered tiny skeletons with their mouths pried open, pebbles or iron nails wedged between their jaws. These weren't careless burials, but calculated acts of containment, meant to gag the infant's supposed power in the afterlife. Further south, Etruscan burial sites reveal clay effigies of babies with exaggerated teeth, their faces smashed post-firing to symbolically shatter their malefic influence. Even the tools of midwives carried traces of this terror. In Scotland, excavation of a Bronze Age healer's hut uncovered a birthing charm made from wolf teeth and rowan wood, a counter-charm to outbite any infant born with its own dental weaponry. Why teeth? In cultures where breastfeeding was survival, a baby that could bite its mother's nipple wasn't just inconvenient, it was an abomination. The Maori spoke of Taniwa children, whose teeth marked them as shape-shifting water spirits in human guise. Slavic folklore warned that a toothed newborn would grow up to be a verikalakas, a vampire that preyed on its own family. The fear wasn't just symbolic, it was visceral. A baby's first teeth typically emerge around 6 months, so those born with them defied nature's timeline, suggesting interference from darker forces. Rituals to neutralize these infants were as varied as they were brutal. In parts of ancient Gaul, elders would rub the gums of toothed newborns with garlic or ground owl bones, substances believed to burn away witchcraft. The Yoruba of West Africa performed ceremonial tooth extractions using copper tools, then threaded the tiny teeth onto strings worn by warriors as protective amulets. Meanwhile, in medieval Scandinavia, suspected witch babies were wrapped in swaddling cloths dyed blue, the color thought to repel evil, and left overnight at crossroads where wandering spirits might claim back their unnatural offspring. But the darkest evidence comes from forensic archaeology. Mass graves in Iron Age Britain contain clusters of infant skeletons with telltale skull fractures, all under 6 months old, their jawbones showing neonatal teeth. These weren't random acts of violence, they were systematic purges, carried out by societies convinced they were averting disaster. Some sites show eerie attempts at atonement. In Dorset, one such grave included a woven basket filled with milk teeth from older children, perhaps an offering to appease the spirits of the slain. The terror persisted for millennia. Even as late as the 1700s, French midwives' manuals included recipes for teething tonics, laced with hemlock, to be administered discreetly to suspect infants. In colonial America, the infamous witch's teat, a small protrusion sometimes found on newborns, was often searched for alongside teeth, both considered marks of Satan. What's chilling isn't just the cruelty, but the logic behind it. If evil could infiltrate humanity at its most vulnerable, then no one was ever truly safe. Today, neonatal teeth are recognized as a rare genetic quirk, occurring in about 1 in every 2,000 births. But dig your fingers into the soil of an ancient village, and you might still feel the echo of that old fear, sharp as a baby's tooth against skin. Some shadows linger long after the light arrives. When the sky split with a flash of lightning, prehistoric people didn't see electricity. They saw the glint of a god's fishing hook, hurling down from the heavens to snatch souls from the earth. Imagine standing in an open field during a storm, watching those jagged streaks pierce the ground, and knowing each one was a divine lure searching for its next catch. This wasn't just poetic imagery, it was a matter of life and death. The evidence is embedded in the very tools ancient civilizations crafted to protect themselves. Along the coast of ancient Greece, archaeologists found bronze lightning rods shaped like fishing harpoons, their barbed tips pointing skyward as if to tangle the gods' lines before they could hook human souls. In Peru, the Chimu people built temples with copper roofs adorned with wave-like engravings, symbolic nets, to trap celestial fishermen before they could strike. Even the materials told a story. Scandinavian tribes fashioned lightning charms from whalebone, believing the creature's deep diving prowess could outswim the gods' hooks. Why fishing? The parallels were impossible to ignore. Lightning struck near water with eerie frequency, its forked branches mimicking the shape of fishing spears. The Maori of New Zealand called lightning Tohaki's lines, describing how the god of thunder cast his glowing hooks into lakes and rivers to haul up souls for the underworld. Meanwhile, in West Africa, Yoruba oral traditions warned that standing under a tree during a storm made you bait, your shadow rippling like a fish in shallow water. Rituals evolved to outwit these cosmic anglers. Baltic fishermen wove their nets with threads of red dye, the color believed to blind the gods to their presence. The Ainu of Japan carved spiral patterns into their boats, a visual trick to make lightning hooks slip off like line from a reel. And in Mesoamerica, shamans performed dances with hooked staffs, mimicking the motion of casting and yanking to steal back souls already nabbed by the storm. The danger wasn't just spiritual, it shaped architecture. Stilt houses in Southeast Asia weren't just flood defenses. Their elevated floors kept families just out of reach of the gods' fishing zone. The steeples of early European churches, originally designed as decoy hooks, their pointed spires meant to draw lightning away from parishioners below. Even language preserved the fear. The Old Norse word for lightning, elding, also meant the strike of a fisherman's spear. Modern meteorology explains lightning as atmospheric discharge, but stand under a storm-charged sky tonight, watch those electric veins pulse toward the earth, and you'll feel the ghost of that old terror. The sense that above us, something vast and hungry is still casting its line. The entrance to a cave wasn't just a dark opening in the rock. It was the gaping maw of an earth monster, a living entity that could choose to swallow you whole or spit you back out changed. Across cultures, caves inspired a primal terror, their depths pulsing with unseen breath, their stalactites glistening like teeth. To step inside wasn't exploration, it was an offering, and the evidence of this fear lingers in the bones and artifacts left behind like crumbs for a hungry god. In the caves of Borneo, archaeologists have found skulls arranged in concentric circles just beyond the twilight zone. Not random placements, but deliberate payments to the cave's spirit. The oldest among them show polish from repeated handling, suggesting generations return to feed the monster's appetite. Meanwhile, in the cenotes of the Yucatan, divers uncovered skeletons weighted down with jade beads, victims not of sacrifice, but of voluntary descent, chosen messengers sent to negotiate with the watery throat of the earth. But perhaps the most chilling proof comes from France's Chauvet Cave, where footprints of a child, estimated to be 8 years old, walk confidently inward but exit in a frantic, slipping sprint, as if something had given chase from the dark. The rituals surrounding caves weren't just about appeasement, they were about survival. The Maori of New Zealand spoke of Te Ona Kura, caves that breathed in sync with the tides, their exhales pulling careless fishermen into the underworld. To pass safely, hunters would press their foreheads to the cave's lip, leaving behind a drop of blood as toll. In the American Southwest, Puebloan tribes painted spirals at cave entrances, not art, but knots meant to symbolically tie the monster's jaws shut before entering. Even the tools of daily life reflected this dread. Neolithic lamps found in European caves were often shaped like beetles, creatures believed to navigate the underworld safely, their bioluminescent bodies lighting the way home. Why earth monsters? Caves defied logic. They were colder than the surrounding air, their walls sometimes dripped with inexplicable moisture, and their acoustics distorted whispers into growls. The Aztecs described caves as Tlaloc's throat, believing the rain god used them to drink sacrifices. Greek myths told of the Cyclops' lairs, where the ceiling's eye, the entrance, watched prey wander in. And in the Himalayas, monks still tie bells to cave ceilings, their chimes meant to mimic digestion sounds, tricking the mountain into thinking it had already eaten. The terror wasn't abstract. In Cappadocia, entire underground cities were designed with rolling stone doors, not just for defense, but to gag tunnel mouths if they seemed too active. The Cherokee told children that caves were the old ones' sleeping places, and to wake them meant landslides. Even now, traces linger. Spelunkers sometimes report an instinctive urge to whisper, not just to avoid echoes, but from some deep-seated sense that loud noises might attract attention from the rock itself. Modern geology maps caves as erosion formations, but stand at a cave's threshold today. Feel that rush of damp air against your skin, and tell me you don't hesitate, just for a second, wondering if stepping inside counts as walking voluntarily into a waiting mouth. Some doors aren't meant to be opened, some hungers never sleep. In a world where symmetry was sacred, left-handedness wasn't just inconvenient, it was a mark of the devil. Prehistoric societies treated left-handed individuals with a mix of fear and contempt, their very bodies seen as twisted reflections of the natural order. Archaeologists have uncovered skeletons with deliberate breaks in the left arm bones, signs of brutal corrections meant to force the cursed into right-handed conformity. Even the tools they left behind tell this story. Neolithic axes and scrapers show where patterns exclusively for right-handed use, their edges angled in ways that would slice a left palm to ribbons. The evidence of this stigma cuts deep. In a 5,000-year-old burial site in Germany, a left-handed man was interred face down, his left arm pinned beneath his body, a clear attempt to restrain his anomaly in the afterlife. Meanwhile, cave paintings across Europe depict right-handed hunters almost exclusively, with the rare left-handed figures drawn upside down or with exaggerated, monstrous features. But perhaps the most chilling finds come from ancient bog bodies in Ireland, where several preserved corpses show their left hands severed and placed in their mouths, a ritual silencing of their unnatural side. Why such hatred for left-handedness? The answer lies in the primal link between right and righteousness. The Latin word for left, sinister, originally meant unlucky or evil. The Maori believed left-handed warriors had been cursed by the trickster god Wiro, their attacks betraying the natural flow of battle. Even the human body seemed to conspire against them. The heart's leftward placement made it a target in combat, while the liver's right-side bulk supposedly made right-handedness the balanced state. Rituals to cure left-handedness were as inventive as they were cruel. Celtic tribes bound children's left hands with strips of wolf hide, believing the animal's spirit would burn out the affliction. In ancient Egypt, left-handed scribes were forced to write with their right hands while wearing gloves dipped in honey. The sticky substance meant to train their fingers through discomfort. The Aztecs took it further, sacrificing left-handed prisoners separately, their hearts offered to the night gods rather than the sun, their bodies tossed into ravines instead of being ceremonially burned. But the prejudice wasn't just symbolic, it reshaped technology. Pottery wheels in Mesopotamia rotated counterclockwise, impossible to operate smoothly with the left hand. Chinese compasses pointed south instead of north as the proper direction for right-handed users. Even weapons betrayed this bias. Roman gladius swords had grips contoured specifically for right-handed soldiers, while Viking shields featured arm straps that would dangle uselessly if held in the left hand. The irony, some of history's greatest survival traits may have been born from this persecution. Left-handed warriors often excelled in combat precisely because their movements defied expectations, a fact the Spartans quietly exploited by allowing a few cursed fighters in their ranks. Modern studies even suggest left-handed people recover from strokes faster, their brains wired for adaptability after millennia of navigating a right-handed world. Today, we recognize left-handedness as a simple genetic variation, but dig through the layers of ancient prejudice, and you'll find a darker truth. Fear of the unfamiliar wears many faces, and sometimes it's as close as the hand you weren't supposed to use. When the wind howled through prehistoric valleys, it wasn't just air moving. It was the restless sigh of giants buried beneath the earth. Ancient cultures envisioned these colossal beings lying dormant under mountains or sand dunes, their slow, rhythmic breathing creating the breezes that shaped daily life. A gentle gust, that was the giant dreaming, a gale-force storm they'd begun to stir, and a hurricane that meant something ancient was waking up, and you didn't want to be there when it did. The proof of this belief is carved into the landscape itself. In Mongolia's Gobi Desert, massive rock formations known as singing dunes were said to be the giants' nostrils, their whistling sands the sound of inhaled breath. Similarly, the Maori of New Zealand told of the Taniwa serpentine giants whose exhalations carved the fjords, their snoring creating the mist that clung to cliffs. But perhaps the most vivid evidence comes from the Andes, where pre-Incan temples aligned with wind tunnels were designed to harness the giant's breath, funneling it through stone channels to power ceremonial fires. Rituals developed to keep these slumbering titans undisturbed. Basque shepherds in the Pyrenees avoided whistling on windy days, fearing the sharp sound might mimic a giant's alarm call. In North Africa, Tuareg nomads wrapped their tents with cords woven from palm fibers, a material believed to tickle the giant's lips, keeping their breaths light and steady. Meanwhile, the Inuit carved soapstone amulets shaped like sleeping faces, worn to remind the wind that its source should stay drowsy. The consequences of waking them were dire. Norse legends warned that earthquakes occurred when giants shifted in their sleep, while monsoons in India were said to be the ragged coughs of a colossus choking on swallowed villages. The most terrifying tales came from the Pacific Northwest, where tribes described entire islands as the backs of submerged giant. Storms began when these beings rolled over, their movements churning the sea into fury. But the connection wasn't just about fear, it was about symbiosis. The Ainu of Japan performed dances mimicking the rise and fall of a giant's chest, believing their movements could regulate the wind's intensity. In ancient Egypt, sailors filled ceremonial sails with perfumed oils, their scent designed to lull the desert giants into deeper slumber. Even language preserved the bond. The Old English word wind shares its root with wound, a nod to the idea that air moved because something vast was sighing beneath the world's skin. Modern meteorology maps wind as pressure systems, but stand on a cliff when a gale screams past. Feel it punch against your ribs like the breath of something unfathomably large, and you'll understand why our ancestors fell silent in its presence. Some truths aren't measured in knots or kilometers per hour. They are felt in the shudder of the earth, the creak of trees, and the primal certainty that somewhere below something is still dreaming. To prehistoric eyes, a rainbow wasn't just refracted light. It was a shimmering staircase for the gods, a bridge woven from celestial colors so the divine could step down into our world. When those vibrant arcs stretched across storm-darkened skies, ancient cultures didn't see optics. They saw the footsteps of something holy approaching. And the proof of their reverence is etched into the artifacts they left behind, offerings shaped like rainbows, placed where heaven and earth touched. Dig into the soil of Neolithic settlements, and you'll find crescent-shaped pendants carved from iridescent shells or polished rainbow obsidian, miniature tributes to the real thing. In the Orkney Islands, stone circles align with the angles of winter solstice rainbows, their slabs positioned as if to catch descending deities. Meanwhile, the Maori of New Zealand crafted high matau fishhooks from greenstone, their curves mirroring the rainbow's arc, then tossed them into waterfalls where rainbows often formed, believing the gods would use them as handrails. But perhaps the most striking evidence comes from Mesoamerica, where the Maya painted rainbows as two-headed serpents arching over temples, their scales blending every hue, their open mouths representing the portals where deities emerged. Why bridges, rainbows appeared unpredictably, often after storms, a sign the gods had weathered chaos to reach humanity. The Norse spoke of Bifrost, the flaming rainbow bridge connecting Asgard to Midgard, its red hue from burning magic only the worthy could cross. Hindu texts described Indra, the storm god, using rainbows as chariot paths after battles, the colors reflecting his victory. Even the Bible's Noah narrative carries echoes of this belief, the rainbow as a divine pathway promising no second flood would come. Rituals revolved around these celestial crossings. In West Africa, Yoruba priests would scatter powdered dyes along riverbanks where rainbows touched down, creating artificial bridges to lure deities closer during festivals. Japanese shamans hung multicolored ribbons from trees after storms, mimicking the rainbow's curve to invite the kami spirits to descend. The Cherokee, meanwhile, avoided pointing at rainbows not from superstition, but from respect, as doing so might shake the bridge and topple a traveling god. The artifacts tell darker stories too. Excavations in Peru uncovered child-sized tunics dyed in rainbow stripes, found folded atop sacrificial altars, garments meant to help young messengers blend in on their journey to the gods. In ancient Crete, clay tablets depict worshippers climbing rainbow stairways only to be struck by lightning halfway, a warning against unauthorized ascents. Even the materials carried meaning. Irish druids crafted rainbow gateway amulets from beryl, a stone that splits light into spectral colors, believing it could stabilize the bridge long enough for blessings to trickle down. Modern physics explains rainbows as sunlight bending through droplets, but stand under one today, feel the hairs rise on your neck as those colors pulse overhead, and you'll understand why our ancestors fell to their knees. Some bridges aren't meant to be crossed, some doors only open one way. To prehistoric hands, a rock wasn't just an object, it was a being with history, wisdom, and a voice waiting to be heard. Across the ancient world, stones were believed to pulse with hidden life, their rough surfaces masking souls as vibrant as any humans. This wasn't mere metaphor, it shaped civilizations. Archaeologists have uncovered singing stones in the Scottish Highlands, slabs of granite with precisely chiseled grooves that hum when wind passes through them, thought to be the literal voices of ancestors trapped within. Meanwhile, in Japan's Ainu culture, river-smooth pebbles called ikupasai were kept in sacred bundles. Their shapes read like faces to interpret messages from the spirit world. The proof of this belief is etched into ritual practices. In the Amazon, shamans of the Yanomami tribe still use quartz crystals they call hekura, believing these rocks house miniature spirits that whisper diagnoses during healing ceremonies. Similarly, the Kung people of the Kalahari carry divining stones in leather pouches when tossed onto the ground. Their positions reveal hidden truths as if the rocks themselves rearrange to speak. But perhaps the most striking evidence comes from Neolithic Europe, where excavation sites reveal stone axes buried in fetal positions, wrapped in cloth as if they were deceased kin. One such burial in Denmark contained a flint axe nestled beside a human skeleton, its head resting on a pillow of moss, a send-off fit for a loved one. Why attribute life to something so seemingly inert? To ancient eyes, rocks behaved unpredictably. They grew slowly as layers of sediment compressed, bled when struck, revealing startling colors inside, and migrated via glaciers or floods to places they didn't belong. The Maori spoke of mori, the life force in stones that attracted fish to certain riverbeds. The Greeks told of Deucalion and Pyrrha repopulating the earth by tossing stones that transformed into people, a myth rooted in the idea that humans and rocks shared the same primordial essence. Rituals honored these stone souls. Inuit anglers would rub their hooks with lucky rocks before fishing, believing the stone's memories of water could guide them to catches. In West Africa, griot storytellers placed smooth stones under their tongues to channel ancestral voices during performances. Even children participated. Cherokee girls played a game called Stone Babies, cradling small rocks as if they were infants to learn nurturing, a practice that blurred the line between play and spiritual training. The darkest manifestations of this belief emerged in punishment. Some Native American tribes would exile murderers by binding them to heavy stones, believing the rock spirit would weigh down the criminal's soul in the afterlife. In medieval Sweden, thunderstones, actually prehistoric tools, were hurled at lightning-struck trees to drive out evil spirits trapped inside the stone's strength, overpowering malevolent forces. Today, geologists classify rocks by mineral composition, but stand in a circle of standing stones like Stonehenge at dawn. Watch the light slide over those ancient surfaces, and you'll feel the echo of something deeper. Not all listeners have ears, not all voices need air. So there you have them, 25 glimpses into the minds of our ancestors, where the moon dripped milk, shadows whispered back, and every storm was a sky beast roaring its fury. These weren't just idle tales, they were the scaffolding of entire civilizations. Imagine building your world on the idea that a sneeze could release demons or that left-handedness was a curse from the gods. These beliefs dictated where people lived, how they buried their dead, even the way they held their children. They weren't just stories, they were survival manuals etched into the bones of daily life. Think about the courage it took to face a world where volcanoes were gateways to the underworld, where comets were divine fishing hooks snatching souls from the earth. Without science to explain the unexplainable, our ancestors wove meaning from chaos, stitching together myths that made the terrifying beautiful, the random intentional. The rainbow wasn't just light, it was a god's staircase. A cave wasn't just rock, it was a sleeping giant's throat. These ideas weren't wrong, they were the first human attempts to map the unmappable. And yet, here's the haunting part: how different are we, really? We might scoff at the idea of toothed babies being witches, but how many of us knock on wood, avoid black cats, or hold our breath past cemeteries? Superstitions are the fingerprints of the past, clinging to us even in the age of satellites and microscopes. So here's a question to leave you with: what bizarre beliefs will future generations uncover about us? What rituals will they puzzle over? What fears will they trace back to our time? If unraveling these mysteries left you as awestruck as it did us, don't stop here. Hit that subscribe button, because history isn't just a record of what happened. It's a mirror reflecting the strangest, most human parts of ourselves. And trust us, the next mystery we dig up, it's even wilder than the last.